Hi, my name is Aubrey Morrill, but it's Aubrey Smith on the thing because that was my maiden name. But moving on. So the job title that I chose to do with the career profile was on a Child Protective Services agent. I spoke with my mom about this because she worked for the county council, which basically was the attorney for Child Protective Services. So like that was her client. So she knew a lot about the ins and outs of the company and how it worked, especially in Riverside County, which is where I live. And so that's probably where I'd get a job. So in Riverside County, California, there's over 800 social workers that would work together. And that's also including supervisors. They all work out of 7 main offices. And they're assigned to smaller groups of about 20 social workers, and they have to work with 20 of those 20 of the small group work with one supervisor to coordinate time off. So that is including in the working environment. So that's one of the things that you need to consider, or I need to consider, is the flexibility of taking time off. And I would say it's not as flexible because there are a lot of employees. And I'll go on later to explain how it's a very time-consuming job. It's also really difficult to schedule time off because of the intensity of the workload. They're basically on call all the time. They work holidays, they work weekends, everything. You can be called at any time during any point of the day, middle of the night, to remove a child from a home. And after that removal, that child is assigned to you, and you're in charge of caring for them, looking over them, and all of that. I'll go on about more of that later, but there's a really high turnover rate in terms of the working environment because of the stress load. Some people that's not really for them, but that factors in because there's like a 3-week period of when you're doing trained full time, and then after that you're part-time trained for 3 months. So, if you have a small group of people and you're trying to get time off, but then some people get fired, your workload becomes even more, and it's less likely that you're going to get even more time off, and your workload's going to get even higher. So that adds to the work environment, but also a stress too. After the 3 months, so there's the 3 weeks of full-time and the 3 months of part-time, but after that there's also ongoing trainings that you need to attend, and they're in person or they're virtual. Another thing about the environment is that most social workers work out of their car. So in the morning they'll go to one of those 7 offices and technically check out a county car, and then they'll go to do all their visits for different children and have to bring everything out of their car. So that's just something to keep in mind. To go on more about the typical stressors. You see a lot of child abuse and child neglect or child endangerment, which can be a lot, in the psyche and on your brain. Also, it's, in addition to dealing with like a day-to-day case management of a child, they have to, they become basically the sole caretaker of the child in the sense of like their voice, basically. So they delegate, like if they're getting good education, medical care, if they need psychiatry or different aids or physical help or whatever. If they need anything, like they're in charge of it. They're the voice for it. So it can be a lot, as well as just like a sounding board for the child. The child wants someone to speak to. They also represent the parents too, and they speak to the parents and the parents' needs. One of the other stressors is that an example was in Los Angeles County. Some of the social workers were prosecuted for, they were criminally prosecuted, I should say, for a child on their caseload died. So, that I think is on the back of your mind as a social worker. Obviously, you don't want anything to happen to any of the kids, but if anything goes unnoticed or unchecked, like you are liable, as well as like the child is at risk. So that's the stress. My mom shared a story about how she was in court and one of the social workers was crying, basically saying that she had been working like over 50 hours that week and hadn't even seen her own children, so that, is a stressor because that's hard. And that's, you're caring for these other children that need someone to care for them and fight for them, but all at the same time, there's a cost. So it's just, to weigh it out. So there are benefits, which is great, especially because you're working for the government. They're employed by the State Department of Child and Family Services, or DCFS, or they're employed through a county through Child Protective Services, or it's called CPS. Therefore, they have full-time government benefits, which include sick leave, retirement, dental, vision, and annual leave, which is great. Some of the common job tasks, I kind of talked a little bit about them before, but I'll go in more in depth. You meet with the parents and interview issues of child abandonment or neglect. You also interview the children individually to determine if they're safe in their home. In addition to investigative work, the social worker interviews other family members for possible placement, like if they would be safe with other family members in a potential need for replacement. They also follow up with schools, doctors, police, public safety personnel to determine whether a child is safe. So they're basically figuring it all out. They're trying to figure out if this child is going to be safe or not in this environment. And so they write up a report documenting all their investigation, and they file that with the court if it's appropriate. But if not, it just stays on file with either CPS or with the county. The social worker may need to provide affidavits to support the removal and issue a warrant from a judge. If a child is removed, the social worker is responsible for every aspect of the child's life. And I kind of mentioned this before, but, the mental, physical, emotional, access to appropriate education, all of that relies on the concern of the social worker. He checks on the child regularly and communicates often with foster parents and extended family members. Social workers monitor and support the parents' involvement in services that will help them resolve safety issues with the child too. So maybe the parents need to go to AA or get sober or different things like that. So they're working with a lot of different people, a lot of moving parts just for one child, and they will have multiple childs at one time. Educational requirements, you need a bachelor's of science in social work, which is required based upon the Riverside County's thing. My mom did go on to say that they do tend to hire people that don't have that, as long as they have the other criteria as well. So just something to keep in mind. You need a master's of social work, and then you also need to be a licensed clinical social worker or have your LCSW. What's crazy to me is that there's so much schooling that is being done, but the salary range is just so crazy. So the salary range is starting around $50,000, and the range goes up to $145,000, but that's only for supervisors, and that's very minimal. But I would say the average would be a high of $69,540, which is not that high based upon the amount of schooling that you're getting done. Again, it's really beneficial work. People, kids need, that are in danger, they need a safe place and someone that's to advocate for them. So yeah, and I just to go on touch a little bit about, I do feel like the degree of marriage and family studies does go into this type of career because you need to know, what's the basis of a family, what a family looks like, how it's going to, look, and how it can benefit a child, the pros and cons. You need to know the background of children and the psychology, how they work, and what can benefit them, how can you benefit both sides. So this is a great starting point, I think, toward a master's degree and toward that if this is something that either I or someone else would want to choose. And I got most of my information from my mom, from the Riverside County DPSS Services website, as well as the CPS website. So, thank you so much.